A very warm welcome. You are here in northern Scandinavia, in Oseli, at our missionary work, and my name is Kornelius Novak. I want to tell you about a fantastic story that God has done here to reach people with the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christus zu erreichen.
Wonderful things have happened here. Let's go to the beginning of the story first. Just follow me. While we are at work, Christ is at work in us.
Ist Christus in uns am Werk.
And I always have this focus. When I prepare a service, when I preach, I go to the service with that mindset. I know things are going to happen through which God is working on me.
Gott an mir arbeitet.
I'm sitting here now in my living room where it actually all started.
Alles begann.
I came here in 2014, but this whole story actually starts much earlier. It started with a call I received 20 years earlier in Germany
Vorher in Deutschland bekommen habe,
to preach the gospel here in Scandinavia.
das Evangelium zu verkündigen.
Back then, when I heard this call,
Wo ich diesen Ruf vernommen habe,
I was completely overwhelmed. I didn't know how it was supposed to work, how I was supposed to do what God had in mind. I was able to pray back then, Lord, your will be done. If this thought I have is really from you, then you have to take it further. And from that moment on, I experienced a lot of guidance. Also that God repeatedly led me up here to the north and showed me certain things. And every time I thought, here we go, something is happening now. Different projects, different churches, and handing out brochures.
Traktataktion.
And every time I thought, now is the starting signal.
So der Startschuss.
But it never happened.
Es war nie der Fall.
So time passed until 2014, when I came here through God's guidance.
Gottes Führung hierher.
This hut is in the middle of the forest, completely isolated, no electricity, no water. I came here with my 2 dogs and had a lot of time up here
Viel Zeit
to pray and seek God.
Gott zu suchen.
It was an extremely intense, blessed time.
Gesegnete Zeit. Ich werde das
I will remember it as the highlight of my life for the rest of my life, because I have never felt closer to God in isolation or loneliness,
Einsamkeit, ja, ich war Gott nie näher gefühlt.
even though I know that He is always there. Back then, during that time, God worked on me very, very much, changed things and reorganized my thinking.
Sozusagen in dieser Zeit.
And then it started here. I would never have expected what happened next. It was like this. I came here in 2014. As I mentioned before, I had this intense time of prayer. And then in 2016, I was at the summer market here in Oslo.
Im Sommermarkt hier in Orsele.
Osle is a small place, a small municipality. I didn't really have any great expectations. I wanted to evangelize there, and suddenly I found myself among 150,000 people, in a village where 2,000 people actually live. The place was flooded with a mass of people. This wasn't just any market, it was a huge festival. And as I discovered, it was the biggest cultural highlight for the whole of northern Scandinavia. In other words, the biggest festival there is. People came from all over, from far and wide, some even from abroad, to meet up with their friends. There were tourists too. And as I stood there in the crowd, in the hustle and bustle, I had a vision. And I suddenly saw a lake in my mind's eye, and lots of fish were jumping into this lake from the outside, which was completely crazy. And then a thought occurred to me. What would all the fishermen do if all the fish jumped into a lake once a year? And I thought, hey, yes, of course, all the fishermen would go to the lake and cast their nets. And I suddenly realized what God was trying to tell me. People from all regions came here, and there were no fishers of men. So there was no organized evangelism. There was nothing at all. And at that moment, I really heard God's call for me to start organizing and conducting evangelistic campaigns here. I was then completely overwhelmed. I was completely alone here. I had nothing, and I prayed, and I said, how am I supposed to do this here? I am nothing here. I have nothing here, not even a building. Where am I supposed to do this? I had a desire in my heart for a building as a place of encounter, where fellowship is possible, where evangelization is possible. And then I prayed for it and said, Lord, if this is really your will, then you must continue here. I don't know how this is going to happen, but from that moment on, I started to look for information and looked around for buildings, but there was nothing. And then, just before winter, I got a tip that there was an old chapel on the other side of the village. I went there. It was dark and cold. I took a look at the chapel. The building, a big old wooden house, was in ruins. All I saw there was work. I drove straight on again. I also knew that some people in the village said it was the ghost castle. Some even gave it a wide berth because they were afraid to walk past it. It was a real ruin. But then I asked the estate agent to find out who owned the building and whether it was for sale. But actually rather half-heartedly, because I thought it wouldn't do any good anyway. I then traveled to the Czech Republic, where I had set up a service for many years, and I visited many prisoners in various prisons there. And when I was there in the Czech Republic, the estate agent called me and said, listen, Cornelius, I've found the owner. It's an Englishman, and he's willing to sell this old chapel for 30,000 euros. But there are electricity and water problems. That could mean anything, because if the house had water damage, it could be completely rotten, and the estate agent couldn't view the inside of the house. There was no key there. So he told me very specifically, forget it, the house is bad, leave it alone. I then ended the phone call, went back to my accommodation and prayed. I said, Lord, that's not how it works. If you really want me to buy this chapel, then you have to give me a sign. Interestingly, I had 35,000 euros, enough to buy the building. I was fully aware that if I bought this ruin, there would be no money left to renovate it. That would be the end. How would that work? So I prayed, Lord, this is your money. I'm just a steward of this money. If you want me to buy this, you have to give me a clear sign. Otherwise, I won't. And then as I was praying, I went online to check my email, and I got an email from a woman who didn't know I had an offer. And this woman wrote to me. I couldn't believe it. I sat there and thought to myself, what is this? The woman actually wrote to me, Cornelius, I had a dream tonight. I don't know what to do with it. It's never happened to me before. In any case, it was like this. You came to this place, Osle, got out of your car and said, now I'm going to build my house. And that was the exact moment when I sat there and prayed, Lord, if you want me to buy this, you have to give me a sign. I sat there. I have to admit, I was completely perplexed. I realized at that moment, now you have received your sign, Jesus is challenging you. I had to think of Peter, who was sitting in the boat and said, Lord, if it is you, then call. But that's only one side of it. But when the call comes, what then? I suddenly realized Peter couldn't first do water analyses or look at the quality or temperature of the water. Now it was about taking the steps in faith. I hesitated for a moment because I thought, I can't buy a ruin without having seen it. But then I thought, brilliant actually, because suddenly it became clear to me, this now. It wasn't just about the building, but I had actually been waiting for years for this starting impulse, for something to happen. And this now I'm building my house made me realize that now God is starting what I had been waiting for so long.
Mir war klar, jetzt beginnt Gott damit, auf das, was ich lange gewartet habe.
I then made the step of faith. I said, Jesus, I'm going to do it. I really enjoy it. I look forward to things and challenges like this. I then called the estate agent and said, I'm buying the ruin. He said, are you crazy? This thing is completely run down. He wanted to convince me otherwise. I said to him, I'll explain it to you when I get back. Please get the papers ready. I then bought the chapel without seeing it and at the risk of the building being completely dilapidated. But I relied on this sign, this guidance. And guys, what happened next is just crazy. I would never have expected that.
Das hätte ich so nie erwartet.
I had already experienced a lot with God before that. I could fill books, but not with such density, abundance, and intensity, non-stop without end. So what happened there was just awesome. For example, I said, Lord, what should I do now?
Was soll ich jetzt machen?
The building needs to be renovated. Where am I going to get the paint? I immediately thought of an old buddy who has since become a master painter.
Der mittlerweile Malermeister ist.
I wrote to him, I've bought an old chapel. He immediately said, I'll help you. He brought us 5,000 euros worth of paint, machines, and tools. Then we moved on. I wasn't even back in Sweden when I already had the promise for the paint.
Da hatte ich schon die Zusage für die Farbe.
Then I said, Lord, the next market is in July. I had my heart set on organizing evangelism there. How am I supposed to do that now? I promptly received a message from a pancake church, which is a youth movement in Sweden.
Eine Jugendbewegung in Schweden.
They go to festivals, concerts, and so on, and bake pancakes there at night and offer them to the young people wandering around and getting drunk to talk to them. They call themselves the Pancake Church. He then got in touch with me. I heard from the estate agent that you bought the old chapel. Can we use it? We have used it in the past during the market, but then the church forbade us to do so. And off we went. So evangelists came, fishers of men came. But how was I supposed to say yes to them? I was still in the Czech Republic and then in Slovakia. The only information I had was that the house had water and electricity damage. I had seen it from the outside. It was a ruin. But I prayed. I said, Lord, you'll know how to fix this. So I told them, it'll work all right. You can use the chapel. But it was clear I sat on hot coals. I wanted to go home. I had to look. What have I bought there? What can I prepare? The tension grew. I came back to Sweden and put the keys in the chapel, expecting anything. In my imagination, I thought, bats are going to fly out when I open the door. I put the keys in. Nothing happened. Then I went inside. I thought I was going to be hit. I was expecting anything, but not that there was a fully renovated cafe. One part of the house was the chapel, and the other part had been converted into a cafe by the Englishman. Brand new. The floor was newly oiled, new ceiling, new lamps, the walls painted, the fireplace had been repainted. There were leather sofas. I thought, there's no such thing. Prepared works of God. This is simply unbelievable. I was standing in a fully renovated cafe, and then there was the problem with the electricity and water. The estate agent had agreed with the Englishman that the repairs would be included in the purchase price. But after we had everything done, the bill ended up being 5,400 euros. The Englishman didn't accept that. Then the estate agent came and said, Cornelius, we have a problem. The Englishman won't accept the bill. But don't worry, I'll take care of it. Incredibly, the estate agent paid the bill. So again, I had no money. I had spent almost all my money on buying the ruin. I then used the rest I still had and bought a huge TV so that we could watch Christian movies with young people. Then I bought a huge fridge. Everything I didn't have here in the hut and never needed. I have no electricity and no fridge here. I bought things so that the whole thing can be put into operation there. A stove that we could use and so on. And God then started to bless and provide for it. That is simply unbelievable. Then the market came closer and closer. The pancake church was supposed to come at some point. I didn't know how many people. Some people were already coming to prayer circles that I had called together. Then we prayed. Then an older sister said, I have it in my heart that I should organize the mattresses. She then looked for sponsors all over Sweden. We had a list of southern and northern Sweden. And she then found sponsors from southern to northern Sweden and bought 21 mattresses. She emptied the mattress deposit in the neighboring municipality. Exactly 21 young people came. Now imagine, it was such a moving story for this older sister in faith. This woman felt totally integrated into God's work, and God began to integrate people into this work. I didn't even have to beat the advertising drum. It happened through real guidance. Look at another example. I stood in front of the chapel and looked at the ancient windows. And I prayed. I said, Lord, how should I restore them? How much will it cost? Or maybe new windows. I talked to Jesus about it. While I was looking at the windows, an older man passed by. I already knew him. His name was Kogi. He stands in front of me and says, Cornelius, do I have permission to restore these windows? My first thought was, what kind of movie is this? This is not real. You're standing there looking at the windows and someone walks up and asks you if he can restore the windows. That was completely unbelievable. He then worked diligently all summer to putty and repair the windows. It was unbelievable from the outside. Then there was the summer market, which was very blessed. Various groups came. There were 40 or 50 of us. I can't remember exactly how many. We evangelized day and night. We had such a blessed time. We had so many conversations with young people, with other people. I remember one young man who came up to me and said, Cornelius, what are you doing here? Why are you investing money in such an old ruin? We have lost faith here and have lost the ability to live here. We moved to the big cities. And then I was able to say to people, there are more important things than money. Jesus wants to reach people. It was simply unbelievable. There was also a politician who said the same thing. I've been in politics here for 40 years. I've lost faith in the municipality. Why do you come here and invest money? What are you doing? I was able to talk to people about that. That was a really amazing time. And then in the fall, we were supposed to officially dedicate the church. Even though it had already been in use for a long time. But we had no pews, no chairs or anything. And that's when God performed the next mighty miracle. It was so wonderful. We prayed for it for a long time. I also searched the internet. No chairs, nothing. One day I had it on my heart. Go to Lexel and pray there with Sixten Hedman. Then I went there. After the service, I went to Sixten Hedman, one of the elders of a small congregation. I said, Sixten, can we pray for pews? Yes, we can do that. Then we prayed together. I then got such courage. I really prayed, Lord, I'm going to order pews from your heavenly catalog. Sixten said, I can only order from Amazon. I laughed and said to him, I'm so bad at technology and computers. I made a joke. I said, you'll see, the sky delivers faster and better than your Amazon. Guys, the hammer was, I don't know, 2 days later he called me, completely flabbergasted, excited, and said, Cornelius, I can't believe it. I've just been given church pews. Unfortunately, they've shut down another chapel. It's been happening here for 50 or 60 years. Hundreds of chapels have already been abandoned. The small places are dying out, and that's how we got hold of the pews, for example. I could tell stories. By then it was fall. I was so exhausted. I scraped off the old paint. I worked myself into total exhaustion. And it was just before the opening. It was already fall. It had been a cold summer. Then an engineer came in. I was sitting there in my cafe in the evening, and I was completely exhausted. Then an engineer came in and said, Cornelius, I used to help plan and install the heating system. I can tell you that if you use it, you'll go broke. It was an old system that was based on electricity and sucked a lot of power. And the house is poorly insulated. I was sitting there, and I have to be honest, to my shame, I fell into such a hole. I sat there and thought, that's it. I can't carry on any longer. And I sat there doubting, devastated and thinking, it's all over now. I then got a kick up the backside from God's Spirit. And then I was reminded of the passage in Moses, where God says to the doubting and grumbling and rebellious people, how many of my miracles have you seen, and you still despise me and doubt me? I was ashamed of myself there. I always asked myself as a child and teenager, how could the Israelites be so stupid? They experienced so many miracles, and yet they always doubted. Now I was in the same situation myself and was no better. I then repented there. I said, Lord, I'm totally exhausted. I don't know how to go on here. But Lord, I'm excited to see what you're going to do now. How is this going to go on? But you will have to find a solution. I had faith after I had repented and was excited to see what God would do. But what happened next surpassed everything. That was a Wednesday evening. I will never forget it. On Thursdays, I always went to a soup kitchen for people in need in Lixel, in the neighboring municipality. It was a Wednesday evening, and I was at the soup kitchen the next day. I was waiting to do the devotional. A man came in. I didn't know who he was. I'd seen him once at a church service, an older man. He sits down opposite me and starts talking about heating systems. Guys, I thought, I can't put this into words. I was shocked, quite simply. I knew immediately that this was a miracle. What's happening here? You know, when you realize this moment, God is here. I said to him, excuse me, who are you? Why are you coming here and talking about heat systems? Then he says, My name is Kenneth Klinefeld. My son is an expert in heating systems. I said, "Excuse me, but that's no reason for you to come here and talk about heating systems." Then he says, "Yes, I haven't been here for a year, but I had it on my mind this morning to come here and talk about heating systems." I thought, that's not possible. So I said to him, "Yes, okay. Then I'll have to explain my situation to you." To make a long story short, he then came to my chapel with his son. He looked at everything. And then the son made me two different proposals: an emergency solution and a comprehensive new installation of new equipment with a borehole more than 200 meters deep. I had already told them before they came, "Guys, you don't really need to come because I don't actually have any money. I can't buy anything." They were sitting in front of me in my cafe, and I said to them, "Guys, thank you for the offer. But the thing is, even if you offered me a new Porsche for €5, I don't have the €5. I'm grateful to you for coming, but I have nothing." And they then drove off. In the evening, the man called me, again the older one, and said, "Young man, you have to think about it. They're all so old there, and that's why I'm young in his eyes." He said, "Young man, I have some advice for you. Decide on the comprehensive reinstallation of the whole thing." I said to him, "I just said I have nothing." He said, quite simply, "Jesus told me to stand behind the financing." Now think about it. This older brother in faith picked up the entire bill and had the whole thing built there. The drilling of this ground pump and the new installation cost €35,000. We got Sweden's most modern heating system with ventilation and much more besides, and all by such a miracle. So I'm sitting there on Wednesday and don't know what to do, and on Thursday a stranger comes along and starts talking about heating systems. If someone tells me there is no God, that's just ridiculous. But that's not all. When he came, I affectionately call him the old man, because he always lovingly calls me young man. Old Kenneth, we've become such good friends. This old brother in faith, when he was sitting there and heard that we were to open in a week's time, he saw the windows from the inside. They had been restored on the outside, but not on the inside. And he said, "You can't open it like that. He wants to finish everything here." I thought, he's insane. I was completely exhausted. I said, "I'd rather leave it as it is than rip out the windows now, and then nothing is finished." The old man said, "No way, he's doing it now." I thought, what kind of wild guy is he? 75 years old, as I found out later. He has, I don't know what the diagnosis is, ADHD or something, but it's positive. He can't sit still, but he does so much good. It's unbelievable. He then set off within the week. He removed all the windows, cleaned them, painted them, and put them back in. Once he was finished, he went upstairs. When he'd finished with the windows on the upper floor, he said, "Give me the key, I'll do the whole kitchen." I thought, what's going on here? He then finished the rest. We were able to celebrate the opening. It was a great celebration. Guys, that's when things really got going, this soup kitchen there in Lixell. It's something that's really close to my heart because if you look closely, there are people there who have really big problems. There was a suicide epidemic in the neighboring municipality where 7 or 8 teenagers took their own lives in one season. 2 years ago, another 2 of the same generation took their own lives. So it's really bad. There are alcoholics and drug addicts in the soup kitchen. 2 or 3 people I know die there every year. It's horrible to see that. The last case was when we produced and distributed a brochure, and I saw a woman who wasn't even 30. And 3 days later, I found out that she had also died of an overdose.
Und 3 Tage später kriege ich dann mit, die ist auch gestorben jetzt wieder an einer Überdosis.
It was like this. A few of these people called me and said, "Cornelius, help us. We want to get out of there, but we have to relocate." They want to follow Jesus, but the whole scene keeps pulling them back in. They keep falling back, and it keeps getting worse. And they wanted me to help them. Could they come to the chapel, they asked? I didn't think that was possible there. If they smoke there or do other uncontrolled things and the chapel burns down, how is that supposed to work? But I prayed. Then I had it on my heart. Let them come for a few days. They could also stay with a friend so that they didn't have to live on the building site. And then they came and stayed for 3 days and we talked to them. Prayed and cried. They told us their stories. People, it was a disaster. One of them had grown up with 4 siblings, so 5 children. 4 are already dead, all from drugs. He's the last one left, so what a misery. In any case, we then drove back to Lixel together for a church service in several vehicles.
Zu einem Gottesdienst mit mehreren Fahrzeugen.
And then I said to the people in my car, "Guys, this can't go on. We have to do something. We need buildings where we can take people in, where they can get help with their lives.
Die Lebenshilfe bekommen können.
Because we're not helping them with 1 soup a week. We're just prolonging their suffering." And then someone in the car said, "Yeah, what, you're completely crazy? You're renovating a ruin with no money and thinking about another house?" And then I thought, listen, I'm not mad. I'd be mad if I thought I had the strength and knowledge to build or manage it. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. I can't do that. I don't have any money. I was exhausted too.
Ich kann das nicht, Geld habe ich nicht, erschöpft war ich auch.
But I said, I only know one thing. These people need help. And I can't solve the misery of this world. And I'm not going to try. I said, either God wants us to go in this direction, He has to give us a sign somehow, or there's nothing we can do.
Oder wir können da nichts machen.
Then the question came from the car. What kind of sign? I said, what do I know? But imagine if we were there for a church service and some stranger started talking about an auxiliary house. That would be crazy, wouldn't it? Yes, that would be crazy. Guys, the kickoff was then, after the service there, a stranger actually came. He was visiting from Holland, came up to me, introduced himself, and then I introduced myself too and asked what he was doing here. Then he says he was a coordinator for a Christian organization that sets up aid houses for needy people in Europe. Guys, at that moment I thought, well, this can't be true. I then just looked around to see where the group was that was in my car. I then said, well, guys, come here. I said, I'll talk to him, but I'll tell you one thing. I don't know who he is, and I didn't know he was coming here. I left because I was completely overwhelmed at that moment. I knew it was going that way now. And then I went up the stairs, it's like a cellar, and I prayed, Lord, I asked. I said, what are you doing? I can't do this. I'm not a therapist. I can't speak the language either. I can't deal with paperwork. I can't deal with bureaucracy at all. I don't even have an office at home. Please tell me, how should I? Why me? And then Jesus tells me clearly and concisely, this is so moving. He says to me, precisely because you can't do all this, so you can simply follow me and not go your own way. Just take the next step that I show you. Nothing else, and I'll take care of the rest. I thought, there's no such thing. Simply unbelievable, but wonderful. It's incredible what happened next. It was clear to me that we were heading in that direction with the house. And then we prayed, "You must also receive a yes." And I could have run away like Jonah or said, "I'm overwhelmed. I can't cope. I don't want to. I can't." But once I had made up my mind, I realized that God was moving on. It's not in my hands. He will take care of it. So I said, "Lord, I said yes to this, so let's get on with it." I'm excited to see what happens next. And then I really enjoyed it again. Then we looked for a house on the internet. Suddenly there was a courtyard with 2 buildings. And that's exactly what I was looking for, so that a family could live there. Or someone who would mainly look after it later, and another building where the people who receive help can live. So I drove to this farm to have a look at it. The estate agent called and said, "Listen, I've just discovered a farm that might be something for you." I said, "I'm already on my way to have a look at it." I went to look at the farm. Guys, as soon as I got to the farm, I knew it was the farm. I knew it was. This is the farm that God has prepared for us. But I thought, this can't be true now. It was amazing. The one house was tip-top, a smaller building that you could live in, that was insulated and renovated. But the other one, the big house where the people who get help are supposed to live, was the second oldest house in the municipality. Completely unrenovated, nothing. The same standard as 150 years ago. An old post office, a huge thing. Folks, from my point of view, just work and expense. How is that supposed to work? I stood there and thought, "Lord, your will be done. I don't know how this is going to work." Still, all right, if that's what you want, then I'll stay here and build for the rest of my life. I don't know how it's going to work out. And then 2 days later, we prayed at the prayer meeting. And then this miracle happened. Another 2 days later, I received a text message from a man who said, "I have it in my heart to give you a certain amount of money so that you can buy this farm." And then we got the money and had the farm. It was incredible. And then I knew that this was it. Since then, I've been living in this one building and managing the renovation. But I couldn't have done anything. But then what did God do? This old man, this Kenneth, he felt so integrated into this work by God. He immediately jumped on the bandwagon. He didn't even say anything to me. He got a site manager's license, a certificate, came with it, hung it up and said, "Cornelius, I'm now allowed to manage a construction site." That's crazy. And he's a real expert. He used to work as a real estate agent. He's planned and built houses. It's incredible what he knows and can do. And he also has contacts. Suddenly he arrived with architectural plans, and an architect friend had done it for free. He had the contacts in the municipality. In other words, he started doing everything that I could never do. He made a decisive contribution to the construction. It's incredible what happened. For example, we would have had to have ventilation in every room, which is mandatory for houses in this category. But what does that cost? That would have cost us at least 50,000 euros. And what does that look like in such an old house? And he, Kenneth, woke up at night and had it on his mind to apply for the old system. It's just a ventilation system. And then he told the estate agent and a few other experts, "Yeah, you're insane," they said. "You'll never get that approved. That won't work." Nonsense. He says, "Yes, the Lord has shown me that I should apply for it." The estate agent says to him, "You're wasting your time and your money." He says, "The Lord has shown me this. It will work." So he applied for it. And then it happened that the man who was responsible for the construction department retired at exactly the same time, and the new guy who took over was completely overwhelmed. He didn't know what he was doing at all. He stamped the thing and waved it through. And once we had the stamp, he left again, and the old guy was brought back from retirement, and we got the permit. And that saved us at least 50,000 euros. So wild things happened. But that's not all. Folks, that's when it really started. We had our hearts set on missionizing the Northland.
Hier das Nordland zu missionieren.
In the meantime, we had grown into a large team and prayer group. We held church services. People came from different communities whom God had integrated and who realized that God was at work. So we always said, "God er på gång," which translates as, God is at work. I then had on my mind, people, our mission is to bring the gospel to the whole of Nordland. And that is humanly impossible. It's 1,200 kilometers from us to the North Cape. But the churches are dying out all over this area. There has been no evangelization for years. But God also spoke to us through this old chapel, a ruin that has been revived, the post station that is being revived. The gospel, God's mail, is to go out into the world again. People are to be reborn. So everything that has happened here also has a speaking prophetic character. I remember that I once preached a sermon on this Bible statement. God does not want any man to perish, but all to come to the knowledge of the truth. I said, people, it's our duty. No one must be lost here who has not heard the gospel. We must reach everyone. I'm not saying must. This negativity, we are allowed, it's a privilege. God has prepared works. So they said, how are we going to accomplish that? We don't have the money, we're old, we can't. Yes, only when we realize that we can't do it, only when we understand that we are completely overwhelmed here, only then will we learn to pray and say, Lord, you have to open doors. You have to show us how to go on. And then we prayed. We said, Lord, we're ready, but we don't know how. And guys, what happened next is just so incredible. Then it actually happened that more and more newspapers got in touch. So when we were distributing the brochure, a journalist suddenly got in touch. Hey, I've had your brochure in my letterbox. You seem like interesting people. Can I write an article about you? I thought, what do you mean? There must be some kind of catch. Surely this is a trap. Then this journalist from Lixil came, and I prayed beforehand and then said, Lord, it could be a trap, because he was so positive, it was almost too positive. And while I was praying, I suddenly had on my mind, get Kenneth, the old man. So I called Kenneth and said, Kenneth, you come in. The journalist gets out, sees Kenneth and says, what are you doing here? They already knew each other. And Kenneth says, I'll tell you what I'm doing here in a minute. And off they went, and the young journalist just sat there and wrote. And then he wrote a wonderful article about the work here, mentioned our faith without censoring, and even included it in the headline. So it's unbelievable. Churches have attacked us for distributing the brochure. You have to think about that. We were officially attacked by Christians. The state church here, for example, has ended its cooperation with us. Officially because we distributed the gospel. So that speaks volumes. But the world is open. The newspaper prints it. I think there have been 4 different reporters who have all written positive articles. And we are being noticed. When we go to the markets, people say, well, I've read about you. You realize we didn't know how to spread the gospel. But the newspaper started doing it. We then got a front page story in the biggest newspaper in the whole North Country, and they sent it out to every household as an advertising campaign. So not just to subscribers, we were on the front page. So God is making sure that his gospel is spread. Then reporters got in touch and said, Cornelius, we've heard that miracles are happening here. Can we come and do a report on it? Of course, I told them. They sat there with their mouths open. And I showed them the pews and the warming system. And then they did multi-page articles about it. People, God is at work. It's simply wonderful. Behold, I am sending you. Isn't that interesting? We often only read the first part. We are to ask the Lord of the harvest to send laborers to his harvest. It sounds like when I read just this sentence, but please not me. But maybe you know that yourself? That time when you had the thought of going on a mission or doing some other service for God. We wouldn't pray, selfish as we are. We wouldn't pray, Lord, send someone else. We say, Lord, send me. I will, Lord, here I am. Think about Isaiah. God asks, whom shall I send? And what does Isaiah call out? Here I am. Hello, don't walk past me, yes. I wake up in the morning and suddenly have the thought of a Bible mission bus on my mind and in my heart.
So ein Bibelmissionsbus.
To cut a long story short, that same evening, I was the owner of an old postal bus, again Post, an old postal bus,
Alter Postbus.
which incidentally has the same bright yellow color as our chapel, and which we have now converted into a Bible bus, which we use to go to the markets and offer literature. That's really weird. You wake up in the morning, and in the evening, you're the owner of a bus like this. And since then, we've been taking this Bible bus to the markets in the summer, offering literature and church services. Yesterday, we were in Hooting, displayed it with big stickers, people come and read. And I was able to give a sermon from the main stage during the best time of the market. We don't wait in the chapel for people to come, but Jesus said, go. The fisherman can't wait in the kitchen for the trout to jump into his pan. No, we have to go out and cast the nets. That's what's on our hearts. So we've been to a lot of markets by bus. And when Corona hit, we prayed, what are we going to do? The markets have been closed. Then I had on my mind, go on a bus tour. Go to the cities. Put the bus in the cities and offer literature. But I had to get permission for that. And everyone told me you'd never get permission for that. There's Corona. They'll ban it. I just took the risk, submitted the applications, and we got it approved. The whole tour. We drove all the way up to Corona and were on the road all summer. And the reporter also said when he saw the bus in our yard, ah, it's you. I've already seen that bus. I want to write an article about it too. So it was really strange. And then it continued. We had large groups of people at every summer market, and we didn't know where they were going to sleep. And then construction workers. Since we've been renovating this old post office, we've had a steady stream of volunteers, which we also need. Where should they live? That wasn't possible. So we started praying for a new building so that the mission teams and helpers would have somewhere to stay. And at the same time, we wanted to have a pool table for the youth work so that we could get in touch with people there. We thought that would be good. So we looked for a pool table, and there was no pool table. Anyway, one day the estate agent said to me, Cornelius, there's an old hotel for sale back there, and there's a pool table in there. Maybe we can buy out the pool table. He then asked and got the answer. No, only the entire hotel is for sale. Then I jokingly said, yes, come on, let's just buy the whole hotel. Then we'll have the pool table. And while I'm saying that, while I hear myself making a joke, I think, yeah, why not? The hotel would actually be ideal. I hadn't seen the building yet either. In any case, we then started praying for this hotel. But how do you imagine a hotel? I don't know. Have you ever been to Ibiza or somewhere? It's not a hotel, it's an old brick building. It used to be called Sonia's room, a simple guest house. It has to be said, compared to Swedish architecture, it was a rather ugly building on the outside, but inside it was perfect. There were individual rooms, showers and toilets in the corridor, and a communal kitchen. Everything was tidy and solid, and we prayed for it, and then an incredible miracle happened. One day I had the following on my mind. Cornelius, do a mission day in Germany. That's where you'll get the money for this building. Then I thought, unbelievable, well, let's see.
naja, mal sehen.
And then I organized the mission day. And then it actually happened. During the break, there were two parts. A fellow believer I know suddenly stood in front of me with shining eyes and said, "Cornelius, Jesus showed me that we should buy the hotel for you." And then I said to him, "Have you even spoken to your wife about it?" He said, "Yes, that's just it." And he waved her over. The two of them stood in front of me and told me this incredible story. They said they really wanted to go to this mission lecture, but had a flat tire. So they were late, but still wanted to come. They just made it to the break, and at the end, when they walked in the door, they heard the word hotel. He said while he was looking for a place and heard this word hotel, he had on his mind, "Bernhard, you can buy the hotel." And he was kind of confused as he said it, and then he prayed, "Yes, Lord, if this is really from you and not just a silly thought, then show it to my wife too." And then, during the break that followed, he said to his wife, I just had it on my mind that we should buy this hotel." Then she said, "What?" "When we came in, I had it on my heart that we should buy this hotel. And I prayed, 'Jesus, if this is from you, then you have to show it to my husband.' So the two of them stood in front of me, their eyes shining, and said, 'Cornelius, we have it in our hearts to buy the hotel.' That's how I got the promise to get this building." As great as that sounds, it turned out to be very complicated because that was exactly in January when Corona started. To make a long story short, it was very complicated because the missionary society didn't go along with it, and Corona got worse and worse. Then people told us, including people who really have the right to say something. We also have people who we have to answer to or who look after us, who accompany us, who advise us. I can't just do what I want. I had this on my heart from God, but they all said, "You're nuts. You can't just take another building. You've already renovated one. You don't have enough money, and now Corona. All the donations could collapse. Stop it." But we had that so clearly on our minds. And we didn't know what to do. We knew that we should buy it, but how should we explain that to people and everything? And how were we supposed to put the purchase into practice? Well, things were going haywire, and we had our hearts set on starting a Bible school. We had also advertised this. Then young people got in touch who wanted to come in the fall, and everything came to a head. So one morning I sat there and prayed and said, "Lord, a decision has to be made. I don't know how. I don't know what to do." Suddenly I had to think of Jeremiah, who had it on his heart to buy a field even though everything was lost. The city was surrounded, the end was near, and God said to him, "Buy a field." So you don't buy a field when everything has come to an end, do you? And then his relative actually came to him and said, "Do you want to buy my field?" And then Jeremiah says, "Then I knew it was from the Lord." Sometimes you have something on your heart from God, but you are unsure. Should I? How can I do this? And then comes a confirmation like that. He knew it must have been from the Lord. And that's exactly how I felt. I was thinking about this field, and suddenly my wife comes down the stairs. In the meantime, I have a wife, and I'll tell you how that happened in a moment. And suddenly my wife comes down the stairs and says, "Cornelius, I've just had a dream about Jeremiah's field." Then I said, "What?" That was such a confirmation for me. Then I said, "No matter what, we're buying the hotel, period." Then I called the donor and said, "We're sure we'll buy the thing." And then he also said to me, "Cornelius, it could actually be that you go bankrupt with the hotel, that Corona gets worse. But God has led it this way. You have to have the hotel, and if you go bankrupt because of it, then you will learn a lesson that is worth the money." And I love that. So not people who are only ever success-oriented, but who have this view. God also does things to work on us. It's not about getting more buildings or being done with the buildings, but am I willing to let God change me? God is working on us, and I accepted the challenge many years ago and said, "Lord, if it's like this, it's like this. But strangely enough, I had something completely different on my mind. I told my mission leader at the time, who also had these concerns that donations would decrease overall because of Corona, "You know," I say, "in all humility, I believe that donations will go up for us." He looked at me. He said, "Why would that be?" I said, "Yes, quite simply, because the people who donate to us know who we are and what we do. And they know that we're not going backwards. We are moving forward. We did that back then in the rocker scene, in other things. We're moving forward, and right now, if it's the case that Corona tightens everything up and the end times, this whole issue, they know we're moving forward." And that's exactly what happened.
I've always been interested in what's in the Bible. I've never really read it that closely. Here I simply have the time and, above all, the opportunity, through the lessons and all the free time that I can use, to deal a lot with the Bible and my relationship with God, and also to recognize connections.
I was motivated to come to the missionary work and the Bible school in northern Sweden simply to follow God's calling for my life that I recognize here. What is the next step? What does He have planned for me in my life? And of course, the social projects, the practical things, the fact that we can simply lend a hand here, that's what motivated me. I've known Kornelius for 15 to 20 years from the Holy Writers, and that's what tipped the scales for me to come here.
I can say with all gratitude and humility before God, praise be to the Lord, our donations went up. This is simply unbelievable, and Corona has also hit hard in Sweden. The churches that still exist have all ceased to operate.
Die haben alle ihren Betrieb eingestellt.
Although they were still allowed to meet by law, they didn't do it, with the argument of charity and consideration.
Aus Nächstenliebe und Rücksicht.
And I said, people, if you have charity, then you preach the gospel, then you invite people, right now. Jesus said there will be wars, hardships, everything, but the gospel will be preached for a witness to all nations, and then the end will come. Just then, when things come to a head, we must carry on. According to law and order, of course. Without breaking the laws here, we were allowed to meet after all.
Hier die Gesetze zu brechen, aber wir durften uns doch treffen.
So what did we do? We then held church services outside and set up fire barrels at minus 20 degrees, like in the Bronx, at a distance,
Mit Abstand.
so that the families and individual households could stand at a distance, and held open-air church services. We even received praise for our concept from the Corona Crisis Council. The police came, looked at it, and said, "Why don't the others do it like this? It's just unbelievable. We have opportunities, and why aren't they being used?" But we were then attacked by all the Christian communities, saying that we were spreading Corona and that we were to blame if the population talked badly about Christians. We then had it in our hearts to produce a brochure and distribute it throughout the North Country. Our Bible students then walked to all the villages in winter. We have now taken the brochure as far as the North Cape, even 2 different brochures, and we then asked a church far in the north if we could spend the night there, and we were allowed to gather, but they still wouldn't let us. And we asked why not. Out of consideration and charity, They don't want the public to think that they're not taking this issue seriously in spreading the virus.
Dass die Bevölkerung denkt, dass sie diese Problematik nicht ernst nehmen und den Virus verbreiten.
But the crazy thing was, the hotels were open, the restaurants were open, tourists were there, all the workers who come from all over Europe to build the wind turbines and so on, they came from all over the world. The restaurants, stores, everything was open. And I'm supposed to have a guilty conscience when we spread the gospel. Folks, I still don't get it today. We are following the rules, but folks, I understood that a long time ago. Why God has called us here is very simple. The people who are here don't make it because of their beliefs, because of their nature. They can't make it here on their own. God knew this was all going to happen, and He had to start something new. And it's fantastic to see how things are progressing here. So we were able, especially in the Corona time, because we have the hotel, to have the Bible students here and distribute the brochures. This has enabled us to reach the whole of the North Country with the gospel. People have contacted us, ordered Bibles, ordered literature. Some have told us, I've never thought about God, but now He's isolated me. Now I'm in quarantine. Now I have time to think about it. What I most personally appreciate, of course, is that God not only provides for this work, for buildings and for missionary work, but that He also knows what we need as human beings. That He is a God who created man and woman, who wants a marriage to succeed. When I came here, I was alone, and this is what happened. As I sat here in this armchair, in this place, it was evening. It was completely quiet. I'd been completely alone here for many kilometers. My dogs were sitting on the sofa. Suddenly, they started barking, jumping around, barking, and I thought, what's going on now? I jumped up, went to the window. There was a bear outside my window. It was completely unexpected, because I had put a huge fence all around it to prevent bears from coming in. Precisely because of the dogs, etc., the bear had managed to get the gate open and wandered in. To make a long story short, the bear trolled when the dogs were barking. After it had gone, I had an impulse from God, just as unexpectedly as this bear came out of nowhere. Out of the forest, your wife will appear. What? Okay, I thought. And that actually happened in 2018. We had a really intense summer here. It was very hot. Several mission teams came to help out here, with the Bible bus, the markets, etc. The last team arrived and a bus pulled up and the team got out. And suddenly a woman jumped out of the car and shouted, full of enthusiasm and energy, "Here we go." And then I knew, you can't explain it. That could be her. And they were here for 5 days, and with every moment I saw them, I knew that was bearable. That was the bear that had come out of the forest. The climax would have been if her name really was Burble. But her name is Christina, and after the 5 days, it was clear to me that it was her. And when they left, I then wrote to her, and I also realized that something had happened on her part. But we really wanted to let God's will be done, because after 5 days, how can you decide that? And here's the whole work and everything around it. She wanted to fast with the family and did so. And on the last day of fasting, she really prayed specifically that Jesus would show her whether I was the right man or not. And she suddenly had it on her mind that she should contact her uncle, and she did. She wrote to him, "Hi Benny, you don't know what's going on in my life. I was in Sweden. I've met Kornelius. That's the situation." And he promptly replied, "Bullseye." What had happened? We visited him later. We asked Benny, "What's the story here?" This is what he told us. A few weeks before Christina came here, he didn't know I was in Sweden. He didn't know she wanted to come here for an outreach. He didn't know anything. He had seen me once 7 years ago. We had a brief conversation once at the end of the service. I didn't know who that was. A few weeks before Christina came here, it was her birthday. He had congratulated her by text message and suddenly had it on his mind that she and I were getting together. He was completely surprised himself. He then said to his wife, "I had it on my mind that Christina and Kornelius would get together. But what am I supposed to do with that? I could be wrong. Surely we can't say anything like that." Then they prayed for wisdom because they were overwhelmed. And they prayed, he told us, "Lord, what should we do about this?" Suddenly he said, "Come on, let's do it this way. We won't say anything. We can't do this to the girl. We won't say anything. But if she gets in touch and says something about Kornelius, that something is going on, then we'll confirm it." And from that moment on, they prayed for us. And now she suddenly comes out of nowhere and says, "Benny, I'm in Sweden and I've met Kornelius. And this is the situation." He was completely astonished and told her about it. And for Christina, it was simply confirmation that this is how it should be, that it fits. She had fallen in love with me. I had fallen in love with her too. But there was insecurity and lots of other things in the background that were blocking it. And this guidance made things clear for her. She then came back to Sweden. I then proposed to her. We then went to Germany because I knew I had to see her mother and ask for Christina's hand in marriage. And yes, that was an amazing story. And God was a wonderful conductor there too. We were at the end of the summer. We had no more money. Everything was invested in Bibles and in the mission, and there was nothing left. And now we were supposed to prepare a wedding, and I wanted to do it like it says in the Bible. When you celebrate, don't just invite your relatives whom you love, but invite everyone. Go to the hedges and fences. And that's what we did. I invited everyone I could. For example, I went to an institution where there are young people who are difficult to educate, and I gave testimony there and invited them to the wedding. The family said, that's not possible. I have no money. How are we supposed to finance the wedding?" But God did such a great, incredible thing, especially when we had to buy the rings. A fellow believer came and brought us 1,500 euros for the family and said, "You'll definitely need that for the wedding." So we were able to buy the rings. 2 weeks later, the decorations and the wedding dress were due. A couple we didn't even know came and gave us 3,500 euros. So incredibly, we were able to buy the decorations. We got everything. Folks, we ended up with hundreds of guests. I lost count.
Do you take Cornelius as your husband and promise to be faithful to him in good times and difficult times, to love, respect, and honor him until death do you part? Then answer, yes, with God's help.
Yes, with God's help.
Then may God bless you.
Hundreds of guests were there. We had countless cakes and pastries. And I was able to tell this story that I've been telling now about how God brought us together. We had people from criminal motorcycle clubs there. We had everything. It was a glorious crusade for the glory of God, a fantastic celebration, and I'll never forget it. Folks, what matters at a wedding like this? Is this the cake, really? I remember one of the boys, one of those hard-to-raise boys, he was standing in line to congratulate us. This boy said, "It moved me so much," he said. "Thank you for letting me be at your wedding. I've never been to a wedding before. I don't even know what it is." Think about how people live today, how they grow up today. I am so grateful that we were privileged to do this and that these people were enabled to hear about Jesus. We have a very intense young marriage. Christina got pregnant with Arvid straight away, which was excellent. Then the second one can follow immediately, Randolph. We now have 2 children. Our mother-in-law always says they're atomic kids. The 2 children are packed full of energy. The energy they have is astonishing. As far as that goes, it was a joy, but also a challenge with the 2 of them. And getting everything under one roof is not that easy. Doing the ministries, the church services, prayer sessions, looking after the work, the 2 children, that was really extreme at times, especially when the children weren't sleeping through the night. It's really tough to juggle everything. And you also notice that life changes completely. I used to always be at the forefront, be it at the Rocker Mission or in the Czech Republic at street outreaches or distribution campaigns, but that's no longer possible. When we did the distribution campaigns, we tried to be there with the children. It didn't work, we broke it off, we went back home, we just couldn't do it anymore. That's why it's wonderful that God is calling new people to continue the work in the various areas here. I am now a family father. I have to look after the 2 of them, and I do it with all my heart. And I say this straight away. For us, it was like the following. True honor to our parents and to this generation and also to this culture. It used to be very simple. My father was a pastor and mission leader himself. In my opinion, they always put the mission at the center, and the family was neglected. And I experienced that. My wife, whose father was also a mission leader and pastor, also experienced this. We consciously said, that's not possible. First and foremost, we have to make sure that our family is a real family, that the children have their father and mother. We attach great importance to that. Anyone who hears me talk like this will think I'm a juggler with lots of projects and services. That's true, but we make time for the family. That's why it was very important to me that we have a place somewhere where we have this protected framework. We always have people who are always helping. That's a great thing. They come, they help, but you have to train them. You have to show them around. You have to take time for them. There's so much going on, and I know how I function. We need this retreat area. And it's amazing how God has prepared it. We have now found this place, and this is what happened. Even back then, in this hut, I was alone with the 2 dogs. The following happened. I walked this long path down to the road every day with my dogs. It was winter, and it was always the same route. At some point, I got bored, even though it's a fantastic area. At some point, I started to look further, and then I took a look at the mountain up ahead. I noticed that there was a farm up ahead on the mountain. I can't see very well. I only saw the dot and the area, so there must be a farm.
Das muss also ein Hof sein.
And then I kept thinking about the courtyard and thought, I'm already a bit elevated and have a good view to the left. But what kind of view must they have? Unbelievable. Space was always important to me when thinking about the future house, because you can renovate a house, you can rebuild it, but you can't change the space. And I thought, this could be the kind of place you've always dreamed of. And then I thought, well, you've got time. Take the dogs and find the place. I assumed that someone lived there, or at least someone who had a summer house, but I thought I could have a look. So I took the dogs, walked in that direction, and looked for the place several times but never found it.
Haben ihn aber nie gefunden.
It was winter, so you walk until you freeze and then come back home. I looked for the place again. It was out of reach for me.
War für mich unerreichbar.
Then I thought, I have to go again. I went in that direction 5 or 7 times and couldn't find it. Then I sat down here and prayed, saying, Lord, this courtyard is somehow unreachable. I guess it's supposed to be that way. I said, maybe it's not right either. It's also written in your commandments. Do not covet your neighbor's farm. Maybe it's good that I don't go there and don't see him. But I said, I don't need anything else at the moment. I am content. I'm grateful here. But maybe my life situation will change again, and then you'll know that I'd like a place like this. But what do I know? I haven't even seen it yet. You'll certainly know what happens next. So I prayed and was at peace, and then stopped looking for it.
Und habe da nicht mehr danach gesucht.
And then the years passed. I never thought about that farm again. We now have a completely different situation. Now I have a family. We have people who want to come here, families who want to move here to Sweden,
Die hier nach Schweden ziehen wollen, die
who want to support us in this work. And they are looking for living space, houses, apartments, and so on. And I suddenly remembered a man, his name is Max, who appeared out of nowhere, just like the bear.
Bär aus dem Nichts aufgetaucht ist.
He appeared here on the farm, and it was the same story. Suddenly, the dogs are barking, but this time, they were outside. I'm standing at the window and see a car outside the gate. Then I think, who's that? And then the guy opens the gate. The dogs were free, and I thought, is that a suicidal person? Because I thought the dogs were going to eat him. I immediately ran out, and the dogs were already jumping up at him, but they didn't hurt him. He's standing there laughing. He said he lived in a house a few kilometers away, also in the forest, and had heard about me. A relative of his used to build this house here.
Haus hier aufgebaut.
I invited him in for coffee. It was cold outside. He told me that he is such an idealist. He loves life in the countryside and sees it as very valuable, especially for families. He remembers his childhood in the countryside so fondly, and he can't believe that people are moving to the cities, completely overpopulated, caged. How can you cope with that?
Kann man da klarkommen?
And I agreed with him. I said, I've never had it better than here. We understood each other immediately. He then told me that he buys up forests and then sells them back to the industry, that he also has a side income from this.
Nebeneinkommen hat.
That's how I knew that he also had farms, because farms go with forests. So I called him now 7 years later and said, Max, you said back then that you were buying up forests. Do you also have farms? Yeah, he said, I have farms too. I said to him, what are you going to do with them? Do you want to sell them? I've got a few people here who are looking. Then we went there. He showed me 2 farms. We got to the third one, drove up the hill, and arrived at the top. It was already dusk. It was snowing. The temperature was below 0. We're standing in front of an ancient house, completely age-old. I look at the house and think, oh no, nobody can move in there. We're actually looking for houses that families can move into now.
Das gibt's doch nicht.
Then we went in. I thought, oh my dear, what does this place look like? Unbelievable. The last people who lived there were in 1994.
Und das Ding war völlig.
There was no floor in the living room, it was bare earth. But there were beams because Max, had started there. He wanted to restore it, but then he gave up. The beams had been there since 1994.
Also seit dem Jahr 94.
I saw them and thought, no, that's nothing. It was cold, I got into the car, took a quick look at the yard, then we drove off. And when I drove home and let it all sink in, I realized, stop, this must be the farm you were looking for back then.
Dachte ich, das gibt's doch nicht.
This can't be true when Max offered me the farm for sale. I went back the next day. It was sunny and bright. Now the house wasn't as important to me as the place.
Jetzt war mir das Haus nicht so wichtig, sondern der Platz.
So I'm standing there thinking, this is absolutely stunning. 60 kilometers of a view. I can see forests, mountains further back, and my old hut up ahead from where I used to look up. Surely this can't be true. And it was a moment for me.
Das gibt's doch nicht.
This can't be happening. Now you're standing on the farm you were looking for back then, and it's just been offered to you for sale. And the unbelievable thing for me is that this was the farm that I didn't get to. Back then, that I didn't find. It was also unavailable for two other reasons. It was completely clear to me that someone who has a farm with a view like that won't sell it. He would pass it on, and even if people did sell it, it would be auctioned off in a bidding process. And there are people from the big cities of Stockholm, Uppsala, and Gothenburg who are looking for such prime locations to build their summer villas.
Sommervilla hinzubauen.
This means that such places are traded in the millions. So no joke, priceless. They bid upwards. They're not interested in the money. In other words, it was clear to me that the farm was out of reach.
Unerreichbar.
I'm standing there and have been offered this farm for 30,000 euros. That's not possible. That is not possible. What's happening here? And then the following happened. Suddenly, a man comes up from the village below and says to me,
Kommt ein Mann rauf und sagt zu mir,
at last someone has this beautiful farm. At last someone is renovating it. And he says, I don't even want to know what you paid for this place. Why? I say. Well, there were people here from Stockholm, from Uppsala, who were prepared to pay horrendous sums, and Max always categorically refused. So I thought, what? Then someone else came and told me that he wanted to buy the farm himself as a vacation home, and Max rejected that categorically.
Hat das kategorisch abgelehnt. Da hab ich gedacht, hä?
So I went to Max and said, Max, why did you offer to sell me the farm here for 30,000 euros? Weren't there others who wanted to buy? He said, but there were people from Stockholm and Uppsala who were prepared to put down real money.
Auch aus Stockholm, aus Uppsala waren Leute, die waren bereit, richtig Geld hinzublättern.
So I say, but why didn't you sell it to them? Why are you selling it to me after all? He says, I told you back then, here in the hut, I told you back then that I consider it valuable to live here on these farms.
Auf diesen Höfen zu leben.
I don't want anyone here who just comes for a summer vacation. I've been waiting all these decades for a family who wants to live here permanently, and you are the right man. Then he says to me, money doesn't matter to me. I've waited decades for this one family.
Ich habe Jahrzehnte auf diese eine Familie gewartet. Dachte ich, das gibt's doch nicht.
God has reserved the farm for me, and I get the farm that I couldn't actually pay for.
Hier einen Hof, den ich eigentlich überhaupt nicht bezahlen könnte.
And then I thought, Lord, how should I do this? Of course I knew about the location here, 60 kilometers of pure nature and other advantages. I wouldn't want to have a nicer place, but how should I renovate it now?
Wie soll ich das jetzt renovieren?
We haven't finished with the post office yet. I don't have any money. Now a second renovation project in Corona. Nobody is talking about that anymore. It could pop up again. It's still in the background. And they're still talking about the compulsory vaccination and so on, even though there's now a war in Ukraine. But the war in Ukraine has caused prices to skyrocket, And the result for us in Sweden is that there are no more houses to move into. People from all over Europe have bought farms in Sweden and want to leave because of the Corona policy. This means that there are no more houses available here in the region. Prices have skyrocketed, and construction prices have also shot up, including prices for building materials. From a human point of view, this is absolutely the wrong time to start a total renovation project here. I prayed, Lord, how am I supposed to do this? I have no money. I don't know how I should proceed. While I was praying there, I stood in front of the bedroom where the floor was outside and thought, what should I do here now? How am I going to manage this? And I had this thought on my mind. The beams are already there. Just start with the beams. I'll take care of everything else. Then I just thought, wow, that's just crazy, but I'll do it. Anyone can buy a habitable house. Anyone can build a house with a lot of money. But renovating a ruin with no money is a challenge. It's fun. So we tackled it. Since then, I can say that we have experienced such a blessing. Suddenly, I get a call from a friend who says, Cornelius, a company has gone out of business. Do you need insulation material? So I got insulation material worth 6,000 to 7,000 euros and only paid 1,000 euros. Or a friend is now helping me with the heating system. We have helpers who help us with the construction. So many things have happened. That means we are now renovating the full ride and hope to be able to move in there with the family so that we can continue this whole missionary work. The hope is that the post office will be finished soon. Then we'll have to move out anyway because then a family will have to live there, or someone will have to run the post office as an area. We can't do that. I can't do all areas. Bible school, mission, church. I can't do everything at the same time. In other words, the time had come for us to get out of there anyway. That's why it's ideal. We are simply so grateful to God for this moment. We don't know what will happen next. I could just as easily drop dead tomorrow. My time is in God's hands. I feel so weak on the one hand and know every moment that we are simply dependent on God's timing, on His grace, and on His guidance. But to be able to experience God's guidance, God's presence in all these details, that is such a fullness of life. I can't believe my blessings, quite simply. This glory of God. And at the beginning of my ministry life, I made it my motto what Jesus said when Lazarus was dead. Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? And I have believed, and I have been able to see the glory of God again and again. It's such a privilege. It's pure grace to be able to experience it undeservedly. And at the same time, I say to myself, but what's the problem? We have been given the promises. We can live in the fullness of it. I pray every day, Jesus Christ, deliver me from all religiosity, from all rigid adherence to traditions, from knowing but not believing. Lord, I want to live in the maximum of what you have prepared for me. That's why you died on the cross, not just to forgive us. That alone could never have been expected. That alone would have topped everything that could be imagined. God has prepared for those who love Him what no eye has seen, what has never entered anyone's heart or mind. This is the cross. This is redemption. No man could think like that. God comes into this world in Jesus Christ and dies for us on the cross. That is unthinkable, but God did it. But that is not enough. He has prepared works. We may live in the fullness of what Jesus accomplished for us on the cross. And that is my prayer. I say, Lord, I want the fullness of that. I don't want to miss out on anything. I don't want to limit myself to my abilities and my possibilities. Help us to continue to live in this fullness. And honestly, that's a privilege. That's fun. I won't do anything less. God has this expectation of us, and I now have this expectation of us myself. And I am so grateful to God. I'm really excited to see how things continue here. We want to continue evangelizing. We want to keep going to the markets. We want to reach people with the gospel, and we see that the church is growing. We couldn't wish for better. Yes, I don't even know how I can close because God is continuing. I can't wait to see what happens next. Being faithful in the small things. This is my job while God is in charge of the big things.